No, great. So I think I'm just wondering whether we have questions from the audience. Any questions from audience, so that yes, the panel can answer and we can answer. So I'll start with Fairuz and then to Mr. Ajit Tudave. Over to you, Fairuz. Can we have a mic over there?
Hi, thank you for organizing such a wonderful forum. I think this is a must to have a topic. There are real value addition on this one, because this is one of my research area as well. How leadership, business strategy, and technology adoption can influence in the digital transformation. Look at those two aspects, leadership and strategy, where it is coming from. I mean, you cannot just pass it to the board director who is driving the digital, the representing IT. But when it comes to leadership and strategy, it's everyone is responsible. And it is downstream. How do we push it towards the leadership and the strategy to be implemented? The technology adoption is one portion of it, where the CIO of organization will have to make sure it is getting delivered. But where is the blocker? We know everything. We are talking about it. Everyone knows that. But still, and the technology adoption is happening. You can't challenge, because we are the first to get into 3G, 4G, even 5G, and look at any technologies. We are adopting it, but the transformation is not happening to the level which is happening in elsewhere. So what is the responsibility overall? I mean, what I see here, everybody try to put the responsibility towards the board director who is representing the IT, but how about others' responsibility?
Sure.
Can I have some insight about that?
So we'll come to that. Maybe we'll take the question from Mrs. Dave also and see whether it's related to answer the question.
My commendations to EY as well as to Institute of Directors releasing this survey report. Professor Malik as well as Dr. Hitsuri, yes. You know, I do agree with them when earlier mentioned that you need 3 board members from IT background. But you see, corporate entity, just because you have corporate governance doesn't mean that it will continue as a sustainable economic entity. You need to have enterprise governance in place. So if you have 3 people from the IT of 8 board directors, I think it will not continue as a sustainable economic entity. So my recommendation is to have about 1. But I think many business leaders are somewhat IT savvy. Now I'm going to reminisce something what happened 38 years ago. I was a young lad, a corporate executive. I happened to meet late Mr. N.U. Javadana Desamanya. He was the founder, chairman of Sampath Bank. I had a chat with him in his study room. I was a Podian at that time. You know, he decided as an octogenarian, $500 million for IT. So 1986, right? 500 million rupees was very, very big money. But he was so bold, but he had people to advise him also at that time. And he went on this. Then what happened? All the other commercial banks followed. And they also started investing, right? We wouldn't have never reached this stage if Sampath Bank invested that kind of funds in capital expenditure on IT. So Mr. N.U. Javadana, being an octogenarian in 1987, right? He had a vision for that. So I don't think you need 3 or 4 IT guys to run a business. Maybe 1, I would say. Now, in my case, as a young lad in a family-owned group, 41 years ago, I managed to introduce IT. I didn't come with an IT background, with a background in accounting and finance, but would have studied as an optional course IT. But it all depends on the individual. Then about 31 years ago, when I was a young director, managed to introduce IT to healthcare. We were the first to introduce IT to healthcare. I think it depends on the individual and the leadership in an organization. This is what I want to tell you. I don't think if you have a complete imbalance with a lot of IT people, it will not run as an economic entity.
Sure, I agree. So I think I would like to see whether there are any other comments around this. So I think both Fairuz and Mr. Rai mentioned the leadership, requirement for leadership, and you also spoke about the visionary of Mr. Jawardena, which in fact, Sampath Bank was the first, I think, bank to adopt technology in an aggressive stance. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this aspect of board leadership in IT and the requirement for an appropriate composition and what that composition should be? We've heard from the panel on this subject. We heard now from from the audience. Anyone else who would like to comment on this? You want? Yeah, you like? Yeah, Mr. Anand Jawardena, please. And you are also coming from a technology background, so it'll be good to hear from you.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate the contribution made. And basically, I was thinking that we were talking about this number of members in the board and all that, so I think everybody's converging that there should be one person because others should have some information, some idea about it. But I was thinking that you don't need for the IT governance only at the board level, but there are other levels that you really need to concentrate. I think for an organization, obviously in the strategic plan, you will identify what to be done, and then there will be a digital roadmap or a technology roadmap or something that you identify right at the beginning, and then it's actually a follow-up exercise. And with the CIO, and also you can have a board subcommittee to support, to advise on technology aspects. And you can actually run through your decision-making process through a board subcommittee. For that, you can even engage a couple of other consultants who are having IT idea. So I suppose that if you are not really comfortable with the board contribution in IT, you can still have some other mechanisms to support that exercise.
Sure, the ordinary mechanisms to ensure board IT governance. Understood, clearly. Anyone? Yes, there is a question at the end. Who is, sorry, I can't see the face, whoever it is. Aruni, right.
I think the report was really insightful, so thank you for that. I have a question. IT should be, if you give it to like a committee to look at, which should happen, but it also should be a discussion for the board as a whole, because if you don't take the people along with you, and you know, the capacity building of the people doesn't happen through the HR initiatives, if you know, all the other various functions don't get on board, you're never going to reap the dividend of the investment that you've made. And some thoughts on how that part is driven, because I mean, there are few things that I've seen. You know, you go to the branch of a bank, the branch processes seem very slow, very different to what it is at head office or whatever is happening there. And during the pandemic, we saw how people were hampered by desktops, not having laptops. So that whole equation has to move. And the entire board needs to drive it.
Sure, sure. I just want to shed some light. Maybe we'll hear some more from the audience, but I want to say, you know, we are in Ernst & Young, we audit, right? And we actually audit to ensure, and this is only the risk and control aspects, right? Not on the strategic side. We try and audit, before we really get to auditing the numbers, we ensure that you can rely on the system, integrity of the system, that it generates accurate information. I must tell you, this is shocking. 50% of our clients whom we do audit support, sometimes we do other mechanisms, we might not be able to rely on the systems as it stands. And then we do other work to try and mitigate the risk arising from not being able to rely on the system. Now that's the status of IT governance. You know, it gives a feel for what the IT governance levels are, because I must say the IT departments are also very defensive, right? If you rely on the CIO to the technology people, they will tell the boards, no, nothing to worry, all good, nothing to worry, right? And we have enough arguments with the IT departments of clients to say this has to go to the board. This can't, this should go, and they will fight us out to say, no, this is not something even to the board level, right? So I'm just giving a feel for it. And that possibly the familiarity level at a board level when it's inadequate, but that's only an internal control risk angle. But from a strategic angle also this might be there. So I heard from Aruni, we heard from Fairuz about the leadership that's required. On this, the board has to be overall on top of it, and you can meet alternative mechanisms to get to that. But I think there needs to be adequate focus, adequate attention, and adequate emphasis to look at this. Actively using alternative mechanisms if the numbers don't permit you to get to the numbers that possibly decide. We actually said the 3 is at a high level, it's a best practice. At a smaller level, it's 2 numbers. But I understand alternative mechanisms can supplement that. We have a question from Dilshan or an observation from Dilshan. Anyone else? We might spend only 5 minutes more in this discussion since everyone might be having other engagements for the evening. So Dilshan, and if anyone else, please do put your hands up.
Mine is more an observation,
Yes, please.
not a question. I just wanted to share the experience at HNB, where we actually have more than one IT head, IT director on the board. So I'm actually in favor of the report, basically saying that you should have more than one person on the board. I mean, I think 15-20% of the board composition in IT in today's environment is not really a bad thing. The reason is, I do appreciate the fact that you don't want too many disparate views and too many arguments within the board that can create issues. But it's a very wide topic, right? You're talking about digital transformation is really about the strategy. Where is the organization moving? And if you take the banking sector, banks are laggards. So driving the digital transformation journey is probably at the foremost consideration for the bank's future, not only in terms of survival, but even to thrive, right? Second is the data security part. Then you have project management. There are all the projects that you get on board, ensuring that those projects are happening on time. And these are pain points. There are lots of delays that you encounter in that process. And then also another area would be the cost optimization part. I mean, as an organization, probably in the last 10 years, we've been spending probably 2 billion rupees. I don't want to mention dollars because the rupee has depreciated so much, but it's fair to say 2 billion every year, right, on IT. So it's a huge investment, right? So it may be time for us to think a little different in terms of how you actually manage it, and even having more than one committee, a board committee overlooking IT. That's another thing that we practice. So I think that's something I think it's worth all of us to think about. Also understanding in Sri Lanka, most boards, right, my being an accountant, I can empathize with this. 50% of our board members are accountants, right? We don't have engineers. We have very little engineers. We have very little HR professionals. We have very little multinational background people. We have very few global perspective people. So when you look at the overall composition, we have taken it for granted that you are skewed towards an accountant mindset. And that in itself has certain implications around it. Just some points to think about.
Very useful ideas for everyone. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Anyone from the panel wants to say anything? Or should we close? We have one other observation. Great.
Hello.
Yes.
So I really glad the output of the report. So I'm also someone actually researching on the strategy, and I am into technology. So what I understood from the report and the output, it's really valuable to have the technology space on the board. But of course, what more important is the visionary and the thought leadership for the board. But of course, having the set ground